Bindi is doing so much better now. So things like a lot of travel are a bit challenging for her at the moment. And so she'll be here next year to celebrate this wonderful night.
There's a particular kind of silence that falls over a room when someone who is supposed to be smiling suddenly cannot finish their sentence. It is not the silence of awkwardness or confusion. It is the silence of recognition when everyone in the space understands all at once that what they are witnessing is real, unscripted, and deeper than anything a publicist could have prepared. That silence fell over a red carpet in Las Vegas on the evening of May 2nd, 2026, when Terri Irwin stood before a cluster of microphones at the 3rd annual Steve Irwin Gala and tried, with everything she had, to explain why her daughter was not there. She almost made it. She almost held it together. And then something in her face shifted, something private crossed her eyes, and the careful words she had been using began to carry far more weight than she intended them to. Robert stood beside her, this tall young man with his father's easy grin and his mother's stubborn grace, and for a moment he turned just slightly away from the camera. Just slightly. Just enough. People who watched that carpet moment over and over in the days that followed said it was the pause between her words that got them. Not what Terri said exactly, but the breath she had to take before she said it. She told the reporters from News that Bindi was doing so much better now, and those words were true, and she meant them, and there was genuine relief in her voice when she said them. But then she explained that things like travel had become a bit challenging for Bindi at this particular moment in her recovery, and the word challenging landed with the full, quiet weight of everything that word was being asked to carry. Years of surgeries. Years of pain that doctors had dismissed as ordinary. Years of a young woman in her 20s waking up every single morning and deciding, somehow, to keep going anyway. Terri then said something that the internet immediately seized upon and could not let go of. She said that, ironically, it was less taxing for Bindi to be at home feeding crocodiles than to make the journey to Las Vegas. She said it with the weariness of someone who has spent years watching the person she loves most fight a battle that most of the world never knew was being fought. And if you understand what feeding crocodiles at Australia's zoo actually means, you understand immediately why that sentence is not a throwaway line. The Crocoseum, the arena Steve Irwin built with his own vision and his family's sweat, seats 5,500 people. The animals that work in that space are massive, powerful, ancient creatures that do not forgive hesitation or fear. To say that working alongside them is less demanding than sitting on an aeroplane for 20 hours is to say something profound about the kind of toll that Bindi's body has been paying. To understand why the Irwin family was standing on that carpet with barely contained emotion, you have to go back much further than that warm Saturday evening in May. You have to go back to a 13-year stretch of time during which Bindi Irwin was quietly, relentlessly unwell, and almost no one outside her immediate family knew the full extent of it. She spoke about it publicly for the first time in March of 2023, when she posted a photograph from a hospital bed and told her followers that she had just undergone surgery after more than a decade of searching for answers. She described visiting doctor after doctor and being told, again and again, that the pain she was experiencing was simply part of being a woman. She described getting more and more unwell, while the medical world around her largely shrugged. She described trying to raise her daughter, Grace Warrior, born in 2021, while her body was quietly being dismantled from the inside by a disease she could not yet name with certainty. The name, when it finally came with a confirmed diagnosis and surgical intervention, was endometriosis. It is a condition in which tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside it, attaching itself to other organs, causing inflammation, scarring, and pain so severe that many women describe it as being unable to function on what should be a completely ordinary day. That first surgery, performed in New York by specialist Dr. Tamer II, removed 37 endometriosis lesions and a chocolate cyst that had been physically attaching Bindi's ovary to the side of her body. 37 lesions. A cyst pulling one of her organs out of its natural position. And she had been going about her life, smiling for cameras, feeding crocodiles, raising a child, all while carrying that inside her. But the story did not end with that first surgery, because endometriosis does not work that way. It is chronic. It returns. It waits with the patience of something that knows it is not going anywhere. In the spring of 2025, it came back with a severity that forced the family's hand in the most dramatic way possible. On the night of the 2nd annual Steve Irwin Gala, the very event that Robert and Terri had once again gathered for in Las Vegas, Bindi was supposed to be on that carpet. She had planned to attend. She had packed for the trip. She had wanted to be there, standing with her family in the room, named in honor of the father she had spent her entire adult life celebrating and protecting. And then, within hours of the event, everything collapsed. Her appendix had been quietly deteriorating for months, and it reached a point of crisis that could no longer be managed or postponed. A surgeon told her plainly that she needed an operation immediately, and that her health could not wait for a gala in Nevada. Robert would later describe that moment to People magazine, and there was something in the way he told it that made clear how frightening it had been in real time, not just for Bindi, but for the whole family. He said she had tried to push through. She had tried. That detail matters enormously when you understand who Bindi Irwin is, a woman who grew up watching her father charge toward the most dangerous animals on the planet with a grin on his face, a woman who has been pushing through pain for more than a decade. For her to reach a point where even she cannot push through tells you everything about the severity of what she was experiencing. She flew from Las Vegas to New York, not to attend a glamorous event, but for emergency surgery. And less than an hour after the procedure ended, she filmed a video from her hospital bed and posted it for her followers. Her voice was slow, still thick from the anesthesia. She apologized for being a little out of it. She said she just wanted her followers to know she was okay. She told them her appendix had been removed, that 14 new endometriosis lesions had been found and excised, and that the surgeon had also repaired a hernia she had developed when she gave birth to Grace 4 years earlier. That video, filmed from a hospital bed, less than 60 minutes after major surgery, became one of the most watched things the Irwin family had ever put online. Not because of its production value, because of its honesty. When the dust from those 2 surgeries finally settled, and the full accounting was made, the numbers were staggering. 51 endometriosis lesions removed across 2 procedures. A chocolate cyst, an appendix, a postpartum hernia. The human body, even a young and otherwise healthy one, is not built to absorb that kind of accumulation of disease and surgery without needing significant time to recover. By August of 2025, Bindi posted an Instagram update that felt, to the people who had been following her journey, like a deep collective exhale. She wrote that she could finally say she was feeling better. She wrote that she could function in everyday life without wanting to throw up or pass out from the pain. She wrote that slowly, she was gaining her strength back, and that she could not express the gravity of her emotions as she began to recognize herself again. That sentence, the one about beginning to recognize herself, is the one that cuts the deepest if you read it carefully. Because it implies that somewhere along the way, through all those years of unexplained pain and dismissed symptoms and exhausting, inconclusive appointments, she had lost herself. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, the way anyone loses themselves when their body becomes the enemy, and the world keeps expecting them to perform wellness they do not feel. The recovery that Terri was protecting on that carpet in 2026, the one she described with that careful word challenging, was the recovery of a woman who had spent more than a decade being slowly erased by a disease no one around her had taken seriously enough to find. Now you understand why Robert turned slightly away from the camera, and why Terri had to take that breath. But there is another chapter to this story, one that unfolded in the months before that May Gala, and that adds a layer of context to everything the family was feeling on that carpet. Because while Bindi was navigating the hardest stretch of her medical journey, her younger brother was doing something extraordinary on a ballroom dance floor in Los Angeles, and the 2 stories are more deeply connected than they might first appear. Robert Irwin joined the cast of Dancing with the Stars for its 34th season, which aired through the autumn of 2025. He was 21 years old, a wildlife photographer and conservationist who had grown up behind cameras of a very different kind, and by all early accounts, nobody quite knew what to expect from him on the dance floor. What they got was something that the show's most experienced judges described by the end as one of the most emotionally powerful runs the program had ever produced. His professional partner was Whitney Carson, and from the beginning, the pair developed a working relationship that went well beyond choreography. The moment that stopped the country was week 5, an episode built around the theme of dedication, where each celebrity was asked to perform in honor of someone meaningful in their life. Robert chose his mother. He sat on the interview couch before the performance and tried to explain why. He said Terri was an absolute hero to him. He said he had been only 2 years old when his father was killed by a stingray at Bat Reef in September of 2006, and that, as he had grown older, he had begun to understand in a more adult way just how devastating that loss must have been for a woman who had not only lost her husband, but also had to keep a 500,000-acre conservation operation running while raising 2 small children alone. He said that at every milestone in his life where he had wished his father could be present, his mother had been there instead. And then he danced. The routine was a contemporary piece set to the Phil Collins song from the Tarzan soundtrack, and at its emotional peak, Terri Irwin walked onto the dance floor in a yellow dress. Robert lifted her. He twirled her. He held her. And then he collapsed into her arms while the music swelled around them, and the judges wept openly in their seats. Bruno Tonioli told Robert through tears that his father was looking down and smiling at that very moment. The score was 35 out of 40, but the score was beside the point. What people did not see, at least not in full until the rehearsal footage aired, was the moment where Terri herself broke down during the preparation for that dance. She told the show's producers that after losing Steve, it had been very difficult to smile again for a long time. She said that for Robert to look at her and tell her she had lifted him up was actually backwards in her own mind, because the truth, as she experienced it every single morning, was that her 2 children were the reason she had been able to get out of bed at all. She was not being modest. She was being precise. The second great emotional peak of Robert's season came a few weeks later, during the show's 20th anniversary episode in mid-November. Each competing couple was assigned a routine inspired by an iconic past season performance, and Robert and Whitney were given Bindi Irwin's own Season 21 freestyle. The dance Bindi had performed in 2015 to a song called Footprints in the Sand by Leona Lewis, a routine she had dedicated explicitly to her late father. The weight sitting on Robert's shoulders in those rehearsal sessions was immense, and he carried it openly. He did not pretend it was just a dance. When the routine aired, Bindi herself walked onto the dance floor at the end of the performance and joined Robert and Whitney in an embrace. As the 3 of them stood holding hands, the production team projected archival footage of Steve Irwin holding a baby Robert onto the floor beneath their feet. Robert had not been told this was going to happen. His reaction was unguarded and total. He dropped to his knees in the middle of the ballroom, overcome in a way that had nothing to do with performance or presentation, everything to do with a 21-year-old young man seeing his father's face looking up at him from the floor. The judges gave the performance a perfect 40 out of 40, the first of the entire season. Bruno Tonioli called it a tribute that was poetic and touching in equal measure. Derek Hoff, visibly choking up at the judging table, looked at Robert and called him this generation's beacon of joy. By the time the finale arrived in late November, Robert was running on something close to fumes. Whitney had spoken publicly about how physically punishing the season had been for both of them, and Robert had developed a serious rib injury that made every breath painful during the final weeks of rehearsal. She made the decision to remove a particularly demanding lift from their freestyle routine because it was simply endangering his body at a point where he could not afford to sustain any further damage. They performed anyway. They gave 3 routines in the finale, including a freestyle that blended 2 songs, Black and Gold by Sam Sparrow and The Nights by Avicii, into something that felt like a biography set to music. When Alfonso Ribeiro read his name as the winner, Robert immediately reached for the microphone and said that his sister had told him this show would change his life forever. He was right, and she had been. He and Bindi became the first pair of siblings in the history of Dancing with the Stars to both hold Mirrorball trophies. The finale drew more than 9 million viewers, making it the highest entertainment broadcast since the Academy Awards that year. The voting reached 72 million ballots cast, which was double the previous year's total. Terri, Bindi, Chandler Powell, and 4-year-old Grace Warrior were all in the audience when the announcement was made. Terri's Instagram post from that night became something that the Irwin fan community circulated and saved and returned to in the months that followed. She thanked Robert for his passion, his dedication, his hard work, and his kind heart. She told Whitney Carson that she was now officially part of the family. She added in the perfectly chosen final line that only a woman who grew up around animals could have landed with that combination of warmth and deadpan, that their journey had proved that even a zookeeper could learn how to dance. And then, for months later, on a warm May evening in the gilded ballroom of the Bellagio, all of it came pouring back out. The grief and the pride and the love and the exhaustion and the relief, all of it, right there on a red carpet under bright lights with reporters holding microphones in their faces. The question about what Steve Irwin would think of all this is the one that comes up at every public event the family attends. It is asked out of genuine curiosity and sometimes out of a kind of emotional voyeurism, a desire to see these people feel their loss openly. Robert and Terri have gotten very good at answering it in a way that is honest without being exploitative of their own grief. At the May 2026 gala, Terri went first. She said that Steve would be amazed to find himself celebrated in Las Vegas of all places, and she noted with a wry smile that people tend to forget.